Hey everyone, happy Tuesday. Welcome to the webinar and the chat over lunch. My name is Mike Colelli. I'm a member of the Career Development Office here at the Yale School of Management. We have a couple wonderful second-year students who you'll get to spend most of the time hearing from. Before, though, we turn it over to them and to answer your questions, I just wanted to give you a very broad overview of the Career Development Office, of how we think to partner with students in this space, and what my role is going to be here in this conversation. So the Career Development Office is here to support students across every single industry, every single sector, every single function, as well as represent employers through those same pathways. So for today, when we're talking about folks interested in education, in government, in multilaterals, our team supports them in two directions. The first one is from a coaching standpoint, which is the role that I play. And I'm a career coach here to help folks figure out what it is that they want to do with their life, with their internship, with their career, and be a part of that strategic building and strategic planning, as well as some of the more tactical pieces of the job search, like resume reviews and those sort of things. And we also have a team of employee partners who focus on attracting companies related to these fields. So finding the multilateral organizations to come recruit here, talking to the educational firms, and that sort of work. So we try to look at every sector and every student in a multi-directional way and really be a part and a partner of all that job search process for folks. And having Anna and Danni here is wonderful because I work very closely with them. And so we're going to spend the next hour or so talking about whatever questions you have related to the space. We're going to learn about their experience, what they did before SOM, what they did over the summer, and what they're hoping to do. So we hope it's a good conversation and good dialogue. Send your questions in. I'm going to be tracking them online as we do them, and we'll be sure to answer them. But without further ado, let me turn to Anna and just ask just an intro from both of them so you know who we're talking to.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. My name is Anna Kolera. I'm a second-year MBA student here at the Yale School of Management. Before coming to Yale SOM, I was in K-12 education, so I got my start through Teach for America, stayed in the classroom, worked my way up to becoming a district administrator, eventually a policy fellow at the state level, and then as an independent consultant here in Connecticut. During that time, I had the opportunity to experience K-12 education in multiple roles, multiple levels of seniority, but decided that after 9 years of experience that I wanted to pivot my career to focus on higher education. And when thinking about what type of degree path I wanted to take, an MBA really stood out because it was going to allow me to focus on sort of the bigger bureaucratic and financial challenges that these institutions are facing that I didn't feel like I was going to get from an education degree. So that's why I decided to choose Yale SOM, and that's why I'm here today.
Cool.
Danni Bri, second-year MBA student here at SOM as well. Grew up in Westchester, New York, went to the University of Miami undergrad, and studied in medical school before I came to SOM. During medical school, spent a lot of time doing nonprofit healthcare provision work, community healthcare center type of work. And the administration piece really drew me, I think. Appreciated the management opportunities, appreciated the opportunities to serve a larger audience than I would strictly inside the hospital. Came to get the MBA to develop the skills that would help me do that. Long-term, looking to practice medicine, but also to do healthcare administration, healthcare policy, and spent the summer doing, I think we'll touch on in the next half hour, healthcare policy work in DC.
Cool. Thank you. Again, please send the questions in. We'll get to them in a second. Before we get to those, I want to ask a couple questions, one big picture and then one, Danni, to yours about the summer. Broadly speaking, so you both had interest coming in, like how did you think about the development of the vision of what you wanted, and whether that's related to education, to healthcare, to policy, to government? How did you think about getting that within the MBA and within the experience at SOM?
Yeah, for me, that was a big part of my consideration of what type of graduate program I wanted to do in the first place. I think, I was sort of torn between, do I do a Master's of Education? Do I do a Master's of Public Policy? Do I go the MBA route? So really honing down the skills that I wanted to get out of my graduate experience and what was going to complement the experience that I already had helped me figure out, why the MBA was going to work. Excuse me. And then I think, looking at Yale, understanding the different opportunities that I was going to have here to really refine those skills specifically. So whether that was looking at specific clubs. So for example, I'm a nonprofit board fellow, so I work with an organization that works at the intersection of K-12 education and higher ed, as well as with different businesses here in New Haven. That was a great opportunity that was only going to be available to me here. Understanding that I was going to have the opportunity to work on the Education Conference, which is a nationally known and definitely a huge regional asset. to the education community here was going to allow me to sort of get that exposure into higher ed that I was looking for. So I think definitely thinking through, what were the unique opportunities here at Yale SOM that were going to, tangibly provide those skills that I was looking for was really important.
Cool.
Anna covered a lot of, I think, the thought process for myself as well, but coming in, I needed to develop a little bit more leadership and business skills that perhaps medical school doesn't provide day to day, and that led me towards the MBA over a master's in public health or something similar. In looking at the school, I wanted to know what extracurricular opportunities were available, what job search and job market exposure I would have, and the help that I would have from the school's career development office and coaches within the institution. I think Yale provided a lot of things that I was looking for in access to the medical school and the public health program, very integrated program here, but also access to policy leaders and thought leaders through different spaces, whether it was in healthcare or in different parts of that policy world.
A question just came through. I think it relates to what we're talking about. So we've got conversations about clubs, conversations about classes, conversations about extracurricular, conversations about careers. I'm assuming people sleep. I'm assuming there's social activities. How do you balance? The question is, how do you balance? Like, how do you schedule the time? What's a typical day in the life? Like, talk a little bit more about how you tangibly or practically put all the things together.
Yeah. Do you want to?
I'll jump first here because otherwise Anna's going to take all the thoughts first. Started to use my calendar a lot more. I had not used Outlook or Google Calendar prior to coming to business school. That helps me to keep classes straightened out. And then a lot of the consideration is around opportunity cost. I think there are so many good opportunities here, whether it is clubs or career search or other. I prioritized career search in my first year to understand what the job market looked like, to understand what my opportunities were going to be. As somebody with a medical degree eventually and a business degree. And then this year I've proceeded more towards research, policy work, healthcare law, in that extracurricular space that maybe has been a little bit more fun. But I needed to understand what that job market looked like in the first year, and then turn it over this year to focus a little bit more on the extracurricular or more intellectually stimulating work that I might be doing.
Yeah, I think similarly, using your calendar is critical, making sure that you're blocking off time. I think for me, it was really helpful just to write down, okay, what were my priorities? I did a lot of thinking before making this decision. I made this decision for a reason. So really anchoring every decision that I made on that rationale. I think it's so true. Like, there are so many opportunities, not only at SOM, but across the entire university. There's always somebody speaking or giving a seminar. There's always, always, always something to do. So you have to learn how to say no and be okay about it. And so sort of going back to my criteria and my decision making of, all right, these are the types of experiences that I want to prioritize, helped me be able to make those decisions. Granted, it was also a learning process. I think admittedly for me, I spread myself probably a little too thin in the beginning. I didn't account for just how much time the core and academics were going to take. It was, I had been on the front end of the classroom for so long, being back on the student side, took some getting used to, and took reevaluating how much time I was going to have to spend on academics versus other things. So it was a learning process, but I think it was definitely helpful to really ground any decision that I made in that reasoning that led me to SOM in the first place.
Related question to that, and then it's interesting, you both have varied interests beyond business, and there's the healthcare, the policy, the education. How do you take advantage of classes outside of SOM? So I know you talked a little bit about the core, Anna, but second year you get more access to all your electives, using a little bit of first year. So how do you think about the interdisciplinary aspect of Yale, of SOM, and how did you take advantage of that?
Yeah.
No, you go first.
Okay.
This one, you go first.
So this is one where I may actually not be the best speaker. I have yet to take a course that is outside of Yale. I definitely, I thought about taking CS50 and sort of computer programming and building out that technical skill set, just because I know that's something that's going to be incredibly important in the future. I sort of settled on a course actually that's offered at SOM called Managing Software Development. So I get a little bit of a taste of the coding and the programming, in addition to how do you manage that process and what do those firms look like and how are they different from other types of organizations. But I think, I have plans in the winter to potentially take advantage of some language courses to be able to brush up on that skill set, and potentially, thinking about more interpersonal types of courses. So, potentially taking, an improv course at the drama department, or taking things that, are otherwise outside of the scope of a business school.
I think, as Anna touched on earlier when she was discussing the time management and opportunity management, I gave some thought to what I really wanted to get out of this academically in regard to hard skills, but also in regard to opportunities and speakers I might have here, but might not have anywhere else, other institutions or in other parts of training. And having the opportunity to take classes like the healthcare colloquium at the public health school, hearing from like CEOs, CFOs throughout healthcare industry in the public health school on Thursday nights has been a tremendous opportunity. I will take some modeling classes in conjunction with the School of Forestry in the springtime. Having the opportunity to develop those skills and understand what I really wanted to get out of it has helped to direct that. But as Anna alluded to, you have the opportunity to take classes in all of Yale schools here, which is a really nice opportunity that I think might not be as open at other institutions.
Yeah, it is cool. I talked to someone end of last week who's taken a class at the law school, and there's a class at SOM called Power in Politics. There's also a class there called Power in Politics, and it's a different class in terms of how you look at it, but the interdisciplinary aspect of the school and the exposure you get to all these different things is pretty cool, especially when you have something that you're specifically interested in. Another follow-up question, I want to get a little more particular and tactical. So for this summer, can we talk a little bit about what you each chose to do in the summer and the thought process behind that? Danny, you're grinning, so I will allow you to go first if you'd like to go first.
I touched on it earlier, but spent a ton of time last year going to as many company events as I could. I went from Mattel, like marketing, like toy development marketing, all the way through investment banking, days on Wall Street, some consulting events, and sort of circled back to healthcare. But I wanted to understand. I went straight from undergrad to medical school. I wanted to understand better what the job market had. And I wanted to explore different parts of that market. I think there's so much opportunity here. I moved through, tried to figure out what I wanted in a career beyond just making money and like being able to feed myself. And started to work with the coaches, I think, as time went on, to understand really where I had a competitive advantage, but where my career goals and where my fulfillment sort of aligned with the opportunities that existed, and that sort of brought me back. Ultimately, it just took a cold email to get that summer internship in DC through a connection that I had from prior schooling.
And can you talk a little bit about what you did over the summer and just how you applied some of the things from the first year in the summer and how that helped illuminate what the thought process was long term on the intersection between healthcare and policy? Yeah,
so I worked for a congresswoman in Washington, D.C. On Capitol Hill. She represents South Florida. She had previously been Secretary for Health and Human Services under the Clinton administration for 8 years. And she had that healthcare background that I think allowed for a little bit more focus in the office, but allowed me to learn as well. I was developing reports on Medicare supplemental programs, on surprise medical billing, on some of the work being done on opioids, to evaluate effectiveness of proposals, of legislative proposals, and to sort of look for space where we might propose new legislation as well. So looking at data, pulling together reports, whether it was with Excel or PowerPoint or other, and trying to make a case for some of these programs was a part of my day-to-day.
Cool. Same question, yeah.
Yeah. So I did my internship at Georgia State University in Atlanta. And admittedly, I had wrote about this being part of the plan in my application essay to Yale. It was an institution that had been on my radar for a while just because of their outcomes in eliminating the graduation rate discrepancies by race and income. They're the only national public institution to have done so, so I really wanted to understand how they were getting that outcome. Similarly, it took, going to a talk on Yale's campus where I knew that the speaker was working with Georgia State really closely, approached her afterwards, And a couple emails later and conversations, I had the position for the summer in the exact office that I wanted to be in. So I can't tout the Yale network enough. It might not be through SOM specifically, but I think alumni across the institution are willing to help out when they can be helpful. So for my summer, I worked with the Student Success Division to help them codify why certain programs were working so well for them so that they could then translate that into a playbook that they could give to other visiting institutions. So the university has roughly 100 different colleges or organizations come and visit every year to understand why they get the results that they get. But because they're limited staff, they're working on their own students, they don't have the resources to be able to do a program evaluation, be able to provide that to other institutions that are interested in getting similar results. So that was my job over the summer, which was great. It allowed me to answer the questions that I had about why was this working, as well as to use some of my skill sets developed through employees, so thinking about human resources and those resources that an institution would need to run these types of programs, thinking about the financial resources, thinking about market sizing, how big of an impact could Georgia State have not only within its own university, but at other universities across the country if they got this right. So it was really a good hybrid of not only my passion for higher education, but the skill set that I was able to develop at SOM the prior year. I think another reason why I chose Georgia State was they're willing to work with backgrounds that are different from a traditional higher ed background. So most folks that may work at other universities might have a master's in higher education, or maybe they went through the professorial doctoral route and moved into administration afterwards. Georgia State is pretty open on those qualifications because they see value in diversity and diverse perspectives. So for example, I had a coworker who had an MBA. So it was a good place to be able to sort of learn from different perspectives and be able to apply different ways of thinking about similar challenges.
Thank you all for the great questions that are coming through. So these are helpful, and thanks for those answers. I have one question. There's two questions to the question. It's about not just necessarily healthcare or government or education, but nonprofits broadly. So if you had to think about what are the resources here, and again, we can talk about nonprofit board fellows, which you mentioned before. What are the resources that you think from a career perspective open your eyes up to different opportunities related to nonprofits? And then connected to that, what do you view as some of the potential outcomes for you or classmates in the nonprofit space that you don't think you would have had access to without being at SOM? I know a little bit complicated of a question, but.
Yeah, I think for me, being able to tap into the alumni base has been really helpful to understand what nonprofit careers might look like and the different shapes, I guess, and roles that could entail. I think coming from education, I was aware of, okay, you could teach in a classroom, you could work at a district, you could work in these government, institutions. And I knew of program management roles in nonprofits, but I didn't really understand, okay, you could also work in a philanthropic capacity. You could also work in an HR capacity. There are all these different positions where you can have an impact within the nonprofit space that had, previously just not been on my radar. So I think being able to talk and meet with and learn from SOM alum, as well as alum from across the university that are here about who's doing really innovative work, who's pushing the boundaries, creating new types of roles, that's been really helpful in terms of broadening my horizon for what possibilities are out there.
Cool.
I'll touch on the academic piece a little bit here as well. I think in 2 classes this semester. First is with Judy Chevalier, who's an economics professor here, titled Strategic Management of Nonprofit Organizations. We've had a ton of speakers come in to meet with us. They're in education, they're in healthcare, they're in housing, really broadly representing the nonprofit space. But the discussion of the management of that space has helped to open my eyes similarly to the positions that are available and the ways to make a career out of this space. Urban poverty and economic development with Kate Cooney similarly does this. I think a little bit more focus on economic development, a little bit more focus on housing specifically. But academically, we're sort of fed this stream of alumni, this stream of people who have had success in the industry coming out of SOM and who have been in our shoes in the last 5 or 10 years. And that network is robust, is very available, and is very welcoming. I think the conversation before and after class or around lunch, the access is there through class.
One other thing I'll add too, just from the career development office, in the spring every year, we have companies who are interested in recruiting at SOM all the time. Because of the students we have here, because of the reputation of the school and the reputation of the students, we run networking nights. So like last spring, I don't know if either of you went to this, but we had a social impact networking night. We're specifically related to nonprofit organizations who didn't necessarily have the resources to come do all these company presentations. We allowed them to come to campus and meet a lot of students, and it was a great way for students interested in that space to get exposure to it for internship and full-time.
And I think the fact that the school puts so much emphasis on the and society piece in the mission statement, in really everything that is done here, reinforces that. It makes it easier to draw kids who are interested in nonprofit space. Makes it easier to help kids position themselves well to move into that space going forward.
We had a question specifically about the core. What was it? How did you handle it? Like, what were the classes you remember and you've used in the summer or broadly? Danny, I'll let you kick off that one.
I think core is very similar, I think, to a lot of business education foundation. You're going to get your economics, you're going to get your marketing, sort of through a different lens, maybe, as the customer, as the employee, or as the executive. I think it builds up well throughout the year, through the 3 prior quarters, and then into fourth quarter of the core for executive class, where you're looking at decisions between financial impact and environmental sustainability, or financial impact and impact on the workers that you're trying to protect a little bit. And it gives you that CEO perspective that we probably hope to have at some point, to exert, and gives us a little bit of a stepping stone to learn how to make these decisions a little bit better. I'd say the first half of the year, though, and a bulk of it does still provide you with a really strong business foundation that you expect through your MBA program.
Can I just ask one quick follow-up question, and it'll be the same one to you? Like, in terms of the cases or the methodology, like, what do you remember from the first year in terms of the thought for you, whether or not the raw case experience, the case experience itself, like, what was that like for you in terms of getting an acclimation to it?
I think there's a blend of both. I think the raw case, which I think Yale probably utilizes a little bit more than any other comparable business school in the top 10 or 20, helps us to really sift through data a little bit more. You're working through probably 2 or 3 times as much reading for that given case. Helps you a lot of times working in groups to like break it down with different people and to analyze it separately, or to be able to skim and find exactly what you're looking for in a more efficient manner. The case method certainly has its merits, and we use that a ton as well. But this helps you to be a little bit more efficient in looking for what you're trying to find.
Yeah, and I think potentially more realistic also, because I think, with some cases, they're referred to as, cooked, where everything's sort of put into a nice synopsis and summary and narrative for you. But, in the real world, like, things aren't that cut and dry. You don't get a clean 20-page document and that's your problem. Like, you actually have to sift through data on your own and figure out where the problem points are and where potential solutions could lie. So while I think, comparatively speaking, it might seem more, tedious in the moment as a student, but I think it's also more reflective of what you would actually experience in the real world. Are there certain points you want me to clarify?
No, it was just in terms. That was the.
Did you have more on the core that maybe I didn't touch upon? Your experience.
Yeah,
might have been
absolutely.
slightly different than mine.
Yeah, I mean, again, admittedly coming into school after a long time of being out, and I, did my undergrad in urban studies and political science. So much, much, much more on the qualitative side, on the poet side than the quant side. So, Fall 1 is a lot of just like those hard quantitative skills that you have to know that you're required to have as a foundation to move on to that next level. So yeah, admittedly, it was a challenge. It was a push. It lived up to its reputation as, being one of the harder quarters. But I think once you get those skills down, you're then able to move forward and things gradually, I guess, lighten in terms of the effort and I guess the stress that goes into the academic component. So there's certainly a reason there for why that's front loaded. It's to enable you to move more quickly later. Also helpful because, one of the great things about being at an interdisciplinary school and having students come from all sorts of different backgrounds is that like really rich discussion in the classroom, but you also have to make sure that you're bringing everybody up to the same base level of knowledge on those quant skills. So I think that's another reason why there's that big push in the fall. That said, things get gradually more balanced as you move through the year, and then by the end of spring 2, you're done, and the world is your oyster for year 2. You get to completely shape the rest of the MBA experience as you want. So I think, if you're okay with having that structure front-loaded and then complete flexibility on the back end, then like this is a great program. But if you want that flexibility built in from day 1, this isn't necessarily going to be where you get that. I think, coming from education where I, had wrote curriculum before, that was actually one of the things that appealed to me about SOM was the fact that they had built the core in a way that was integrated. So you could see, okay, if we're talking about one topic in state and society, that exact same topic may come up in Innovator, or may come up in a similar class within that particular term, and it's not done willy-nilly. Like it is sequenced in a way where you're able to develop that idea and that understanding, which like takes a lot of thought and effort on the back end. So I think that's something that's definitely a benefit of the core over potentially other programs where you're setting your own schedule from start to finish, is that there's a structure there.
Mike, just before we move on, I think the core also forces a little bit more integration in the class. It forces people to spend a little bit more time together because we're all going through the same set of 15 or 20 or so classes that first year. If we had this kind of flexibility from day 1, you don't get to know your classmates in the same way as we did because we had to spend that time together.
So I have a question about the classmates in the community and a couple ideas for post-careers. I also had a question come through, and it actually related to what you just said. This is specifically for you. Did you ever consider a Jackson joint degree? And then what was the thought process behind you not doing that?
So I never considered a joint degree with Jackson just because that's more globally focused, and I knew that I specifically wanted to focus on US education and the unique problems that are here. That said, after being at SOM, understanding and getting sort of the opportunity to explore different global opportunities has been interesting. What I did consider was doing a dual degree with an institution outside of Yale. So, for example, in my case, I had applied to the Master's of Education at Harvard. It's a 9-month program. I got in. Yale is very pro dual degree, so it was a very simple email to admissions to say, hey, could I do this? Could I sequence my MBA to sort of sandwich this Master's of Education? And like within an hour, I had an answer. Yes, just get the other institution to sign off on it and we're good. So I think if you want to think experimentally about other skill sets that you want to incorporate into your graduate experience, and those aren't offered at Yale, at least from my anecdotal experience, if you can provide a sound rationale and a way to make it work scheduling-wise, there's certainly flexibility and consideration there.
So a question, we were talking about the community a little bit, and some questions came through about post-MBA careers and jobs. So Danny, I know yours is slightly unique just because you're practicing medicine, that sort of thing. But in terms of both how you're thinking about your long-term career is the balance between healthcare and government and policy, as well as just folks you've seen who you've met in the classroom. Like, what are you personally seeing in terms of where you want to take the career, and then where are you seeing others around you in unique ways in this space? So
for me personally, I think the plan is to practice medicine for a little bit, and this plan is the plan I came into Yale with, and I told you guys on the front end that this is what I thought I wanted to do. That maybe
so you're stubbornly digging to it.
And maybe I had questions. I had questions about as I saw the opportunity around. I think sort of an embarrassment of riches, job-wise, once you get in. But long term, I've circled back. I want to practice medicine, probably non-surgically, probably in sports, and then move towards a hospital administration and healthcare policy track a little bit faster. So make it perhaps like a 50-50 split early on between practicing and admin, or practicing and policy, and then start to push more towards admin policy as I get later in my career. I think other students, I got help from other students who had been in the policy space before I spoke with my team over the summer, before I was ready to move into the government space, because I hadn't been exposed prior. But long term, I think a lot of our classmates have those diverse interests, and if they're going into banking now, They may be considering staying in banking for 20 years, but there could be interest in like circling back towards a nonprofit or a different sector later on, even though they're taking this route at least for a short term. I think it is really, really common here to see a diverse set of interests and a lot of people who want maybe a private-public balance with their career long term and the opportunity to play in different spaces.
Cool. Yeah, same question to you.
Yeah, so I am pivoting a little bit. So I came into SOM really wanting to get the skill set that would allow me to address the most pressing bottleneck that got me fired up, which was the lack of change in the persistence rate for underrepresented students or traditionally underrepresented students in higher education. After having worked at arguably the most innovative university in the country that's addressing this, I can see, I could potentially, go back to an institution like Georgia State and work at, a very large scale, being a large public institution for one particular school. But I think what interests me after my summer experience is thinking about how do you break down the silos of just being at one institution? How do you work across K-12 into higher education into that first critical workforce or workplace placement that's critical for lifetime income? And so as I've given this some thought, what's come to mind isn't necessarily staying within the nonprofit sphere or staying within an education institution, but it's actually going into the private sector and working on the pull and the demand side for more diverse candidates. So I'm thinking about roles right now, likely in the tech sector, given how much attention they've received recently about the need to diversify their workforce, the need to retain talent and diverse talent in particular. Given the resources that those types of firms have and the programs that they're starting to establish that reach across education institutions, I think working in a pipeline or in a program or in a initiative that focuses on that pipeline from the private sector would, one, give me an opportunity to sort of flex the MBA muscles and skill sets that I've built, but also potentially have a bigger scale of an impact because I wouldn't just be working at one institution. I could potentially be working across the entire country or broader. So it's definitely a change from what I came in terms of the setting of the work that I wanted to do. But I think it's still a way and a job that's going to allow me to focus on the issue and the sort of core interest area that I came in with.
Yeah, you're reminding me a lot. We talk a lot about, especially with Dean Charles coming in, we talk a lot about the mission has been pretty front of mind of like the balance of educating leaders for business and society. I think you're bringing up a good point that you can look at the statistics and you say, or you'd imagine a place that says we need to enlighten business and society would have 40% of the class go working specifically in nonprofits, and the outcomes don't necessarily dictate that. But I think you're saying a point that's pretty clear and connects the core and how people choose to manage their time related to like, it doesn't have to just be business and society in nonprofits, but it's business and society broadly. And so much of the interest now, whether it's I'm interested in education reform and I want to do that through technology, or I'm interested in, wealth inequality, and I want to do that through a community bank at a large and so like there's so many ways that folks have thought to bring those two pieces together. And I'm curious to get your thoughts. Have you seen that for yourselves, that concept of business and society being more dynamic than you would have thought, or how are you seeing that play out in terms of what you do, what others do, and what that's like? And again, I think this is a good webinar for that because you have people interested in education, interested in multilaterals, interested in government, where there is a balance of seeing that problem through multiple different vantage points.
Yeah, I think you and Anna both articulated this well in the last 2 or 3 minutes. You don't have to strictly go into a nonprofit to make that happen. You don't strictly have to go into government. You can work in private industry and work with government organizations or work with nonprofits to achieve that same mission. And as Anna said, maybe if there's more money in tech or if the scope of your influence is a little bit bigger through private industry, you can still achieve the same end or perhaps achieve a better end, be a little bit more efficient in the way that you're doing it than if you were to go into that nonprofit space or into that government space directly. It's not as cut and dry as maybe I expected when I showed up on day one.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. I think, especially coming from education, there's there's a lot of debate about the role of business and privatization of education, and people can get really animated. So I think this is something that I struggled with, of like, okay, like am I selling out if I go into the private sector as opposed to staying in the nonprofit world? But I think being here made me realize that, like, no, actually you need society-minded leaders across the board. It doesn't do us much good if they're just focused on the nonprofit sector. That's certainly incredibly important, and we need great people there doing great work. But imagine if that talent was spread out across, different roles. And you had people that were able to work in conjunction and to work in ways that were complementary, and not just, trying to eke out as much impact as you possibly can with limited resources. I think there's great work to be done there, but in thinking about my own experience, it's like, okay, I know how to do that. I get a lot of joy from doing that, but I think in terms of, if I want the private sector to play a more proactive role in social outcomes, I'm gonna need to understand how that works. And I'm gonna need to get some on the ground experience and some street cred in order to be able to marry those two potentially one day. So I think, Dean Charles, I think, has done a great job of sort of bringing this up, of saying, while it may look odd if you're the society-focused school and your numbers aren't bigger, that's not the right way to look at this. Like, we need to think about, okay, what is the mindset and what is, the brand and the way of thinking that you get from coming out of SOM, and then how are you able to apply that in the real world? And I think that's, I'm excited to see where my classmates land, to see, okay, how are you going to exert that type of thinking, in whatever job you may end up in, even if it's not one that's traditionally society focused.
Yeah, I remember, so I started here 4 years ago now, and there's always been this interplay between public and private partnership. And for me, I worked at a hedge fund before I came here, so I'm sorry to say, hedge funds often don't look at the public work. And so there was always this talk about, like, corporate social responsibility and the roles of corporate social responsibility at these private firms. And, like, that concept behind it was something that I just found so interesting, where everybody here is looking at how these two factors work into one another. I found that to be one of the coolest, most remarkable things.
Part of it is curriculum design. Part of it is that the school's mission does attract kids, like, invariably, who care more. And even those who are less education, healthcare, government focused, going directly into coming from private industry, going to private industry, tend, I think, to care more than the average person on the street, just because of that mission, that curriculum. There's a lot of self-selection in here that does lend itself to perpetuation.
I have 2 more questions. Thank you for the questions, everyone. They've been wonderful. They've really helped, I hope, lead a conversation that's been helpful and fruitful for you. One of them, so this is the Education, Government, and Multilateral panel. We don't, unfortunately, have someone who worked at a multilateral. It was the question just came through in terms of the organizations that you've seen classmates interested in, or folks talk about, whether that be the UN, the World Bank, the IFC. Have you seen that? And I can also speak to the Career Development Office in terms of the companies that we partner with. Any advice you'd give for folks interested in those organizations, or places you've seen classmates go in that space?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of a classmate of ours in particular who's doing an internship this term at the UN, at UNICEF. So is in New York City 3 days a week, working all day, and then taking classes back at SOM 2 days a week. So was able to stack his schedule so that he could get both experiences. And that's something that wasn't in his original plan, but worked at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation over the summer, wanted this additional experience. So I think that, especially for folks, if you're worried about, okay, am I gonna be isolated in New Haven? Like, New York City and Boston are not super far away, so it's not uncommon for folks to continue to have, either part-time positions or internships during the school year itself to explore some of those organizations.
Offhand, less familiar. I think that's a great example. Mike, I think you probably know a little bit more about what people are doing right now than I do offhand, but true. Yes, reiterate, yes, this is a thing. This is certainly the case.
Yeah, I think Anna had a good example. I think that helps show, like, some of the cool opportunities people get. I will say one thing, broadly speaking, I get this question a lot. This isn't the first webinar I've done of, like, are there any opportunities that I will have? Like, the beauty of coming here is you'll have every opportunity. So even if you have an interest that no one's ever had before, I wouldn't think that precludes you from doing anything you want. And I say this to people all the time, and I don't say it because I don't mean it. You can literally do anything you want. and I try to be a coach, and our office tries to support those students so you can do anything you want. You can't do everything, but you can do anything. And then for multilaterals in general, last summer we had someone go to the IFC in DC working in their impact team. Every summer we have someone who works in UNDP field offices somewhere globally. We have someone at UNICEF now. We have someone who works pretty much every summer in the UN and the city. So the World Bank is a place where we have a lot of contacts. So any multilateral that you could think about in a global sense will have alumni contacts and resources that you could find. If you want to do some research on it to just confirm that, I think you could, but I would say it's not something that you should feel as though your options are closed because again, we're in New Haven or because we're here. It's Yale. The brand holds literally everywhere in the world. And I think multilaterals is one where that speaks pretty true. So last question. It's kind of in the calendar invite, but just like rewind 2 years, right? 2 years. You're thinking of applying to schools. You're thinking of beginning your MBA selection process. What is some advice you got that was really good? Or like, what is some advice that in hindsight would have been really good advice to receive back then? And if you had to think about people in the place that folks watching this webinar and of like, they're in a place where they're trying to think about what to do, like what's the advice you think that would be helpful?
I'll go first. I think just really like work out exactly what you hope to get from the experience, whether you're considering the MBA, whether you have decided on the MBA and you've decided on Yale. Think about what you want out of the experience and then sort of cater your search to that. If you've decided, I want the MBA, I want Yale, or I want this graduate degree and I want Yale, look at the resources that are available at the school. Look at places like the Jackson Institute and think about whether you want to do a joint degree program, whether it's through Yale or whether it's with Yale and another school outside. Look into programs like the Solomon Center for Health Law and Policy here at Yale and the programs, generally speaking, at the law school, which might afford you more of these opportunities to do things extracurricularly. And spend a little bit of time looking into student placement. Look at the reports and see who went where and understand whether it's Yale or at another school, if you're seeing trends of students moving into the types of jobs that you would like to be at or the types of positions that you would like to be at, just to really understand what opportunities might be available. I think I didn't spend enough time doing that on the front end. I got very lucky in coming to Yale and having like a really good alignment of my mission and school mission. But spend some time to understand exactly what the opportunities are and exactly where you want to be personally and what's important to you before you proceed too far anywhere.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think, getting really solid on what you want out of a graduate program, whether that's linking it to, I want to set myself up to do this type of work and to be on this trajectory for the next 10 years, or whether that's, I want to pivot industry, but I want to have the chance to explore this particular area. Like, get really solid on what it is that you want that outcome to be. And then I think that can be helpful in evaluating, is this program going to get you there? Not only just thinking about classes and coursework, but thinking about the different clubs and extracurriculars and symposiums and things outside of the box. I think for me, what was really helpful, just because this was kind of a weird thing in my mind. I'm interested in higher education. Not a lot of folks go the MBA route. This was new, but in my mind, this was the skill set that was going to allow me to do the work that I wanted to do. But the thing that brought me, sort of comfort and reassurance was talking with people in the field who were doing work similar to the work that I wanted to do and just getting their take and getting their perspective. So, especially if it's something that's unconventional or you're thinking about staying in the nonprofit world, like just talk with as many people as you can and talk through your plan and get their feedback and see what they say. I think that was sort of the thing that helped push me over the edge to apply. Is just getting that outside verification of like, yes, your reasoning makes sense. This makes sense. Stick with your guns. I think, I've been grateful for Mike here at Yale to be able to say like, nope, like this is your plan. Like, let's stick to this. You're fine. Like, you're not crazy. Like, let's just stay on track. So I think thinking about what you want. And then one of the things that I didn't think about, I think when I was comparing Yale and other programs that have, bigger alumni bases or have been around longer, I was worried about, if I attended Yale SOM, if I was going to be locking myself in and limiting my opportunities. What I didn't think about was you're not, like, it's an integrated school. You're not just going to have access to the SOM alumni base, but you have access to the Yale alumni base, which is much, has a longer legacy, has been around, is much broader. And the fact that those folks are also willing to help you out and are also now in your network just pays dividends in the long run.
Awesome. Yep. Danny, thank you. Anna, thank you. Thank you all for the wonderful questions. Hopefully we see you soon. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Just turn it off.